Or we'll just do that.
So hi everyone, my name is Amaya and I'm filling in for May, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, she's not feeling well. So before we get started, I just wanted to have a couple of minutes to do some announcements. For the upcoming talks, we've got an Azure and a BizTalk talk next Tuesday. We're going to have some folks from Microsoft come over and tell us why we should use Microsoft Azure and BizSpark, and why folks who are not building on the Microsoft platform should also consider it. And then the week after next, on the 9th, we're going to have somebody from 10gen come in and talk about MongoDB. So 10gen is the company that built MongoDB. MongoDB, as you know, is the largest, most popular NoSQL solution out there. So that should be a lot of fun. So it's my privilege today to introduce you to Jeff. Jeff is the CTO of Buddy.com. How many folks here have heard of Buddy.com? All right. Yeah, so you know it's a hot startup from based out of Kirkland. They just, I think we closed a $1 million round in May.
We announced a oversubscribed $1 million round.
There you go. So blazing hot. And so Jeff is going to talk about how Buddy went from 0 to 10,000 developers in a year. And Jeff is a Microsoft veteran, so that might be of interest to a bunch of us who are at Microsoft, and so this is going to be super interesting.
Cool, thanks. Thanks guys for coming out. It's definitely good to see everyone. So first off, we have Buddy shirts for everyone here. So before you leave, make sure you grab some free marketing material from us. So I'm Jeff. I'm the CTO of Buddy. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about Buddy. We're going to talk about platform as a service or backend as a service, and why you see so many instances of it, and why there's so many different companies saying that that's what they do. And then I'm going to tell you how we built Buddy, the tools we use Buddy, our build server, all those kinds of things. And of course, if you guys have questions, just shout them out. So I'm Jeff. This is Dave, our CEO. Ryan, developer. Lauren, amazing admin. And the rest of the team couldn't be here tonight. So what is Buddy? So we're going to level set a little bit. So Buddy, and we'll get into more details, Buddy is a top of the stack, scenario-focused API targeted at brands, agencies, and dev shops. Okay, so what that means is we are not a CPU in the cloud. We are not a database in the cloud. We are a fully designed API in the cloud. So for example, at Buddy, you will not see save object, but you will see search for friends. You will not see run regular expression, but you will see search for places within 5 miles of me in this category. Right? It's a top of the stack API. So for the brand, it's 100% white label, and this is really important. So if you're Starbucks or Red Bull or DreamWorks or insert big brand name here, you don't want to give away brand equity. You don't want to have my app powered by X. So Buddy is 100% white label. This is actually sort of a detriment to us a little bit because we can't talk about the apps on the system. So everyone asks, what apps are running the system? What apps are running the system? We actually can't talk about them because it's fully white label. Every app has a private cloud. Every app is siloed. So if I'm a developer and you're a developer, you can never see my data and I can never see your data. It's all siloed on the dev side. And then for the brand, of course, that brand equity, owning that customer touch point is 100% on you. We don't own the customer, we don't own the data. It's your data, your customer, your app. So the real reason we use Buddy is we deliver ready-to-use scenarios. Every hour you spend building a cloud is an hour you don't spend building cross-platform. Every hour you spend scaling your database is an hour you don't spend acquiring new customers. It's at the core value of Buddy. Why we do what we do and why the companies we work with love the product. The other thing about Buddy is the analytics. So one of the stories that we tell is, 15, 20 years ago, everyone had a website. Right? Every company's going crazy to have a website. Then they all built websites. And then they all thought, what am I going to do with this website? And that created an entire industry about monetization and analytics and et cetera, et cetera. 5 or 6 years ago, everyone said, I gotta have a mobile app. So everyone's building mobile apps. The Buddy bet, and you see other companies betting on the same thing, is over the next 18 months, especially the brands, are going to start to understand, I need to monetize that app. I need to understand the app. I need to understand when I run an ad in Chicago, do any users in LA get affected because their friends told them about the cool ad they saw, right? That stuff today for a brand or an agency is really hard. Buddy makes it magical and it just works, and we'll get into sort of how it works. So a little bit about where Buddy is today. So we were 9,000 developers a few weeks ago. I haven't actually looked today what we're at. About 10,000 apps in some form of production. Some of them shipped, some of them just started, some of them almost done, etc. The public API is 12 months old. So a year ago, right now, we released our public beta, and we did it in private alpha before that. And then in May, we released our V1. So the public API has only been there for a year. 16 months ago, I was at Microsoft. So I was at Microsoft for 12 years. Dave was there for 11 years. So quit Microsoft, built Buddy, did a beta, validated the project, re-architected a bunch of it, going from beta to V1, raised our seed round, and now this is all about execution and building a business and acquiring more customers and making more money. So 2 founders, Dave and Jeff, and we announced an oversubscribed $1 million seed round, which really, when you hear that, either means A, they raised more than $1 million, or they had more people who wanted to put in on the seed round. That's what oversubscribed means. We have the 3 icons down here. So we're part of a late stage accelerator in the Bay Area called Kick Labs. So a lot of you are probably familiar with YC or Techstars. Kick Labs is a small version of that for later stage companies, not just an idea, targeted directly at brands. So for example, Balmer was there today demoing Windows 8. Trinity Capital, Presslight, and we're also very proud to be one of the first 2 Bing Fund companies. So Microsoft is a financial partner, but they're more importantly a technology partner for us. So I thought I'd start with a quick demo. Because when we give these talks, a lot of times people kind of have a hard time understanding kind of what we do. And I'm going to hope the demo guides are good to me. So I'm just going to take a quick picture here and I'm going to explain to you what's going on. Okay. So we work with an evangelism team. And one of the scenarios they had is, hey, we go to all these events, we take all these photos, but before we upload the photos, we want to watermark them. And so what they do is they go to the event, take the pictures, go back to their desk the next day, if it's startup weekend on Monday, watermark the pictures, and upload them. And that just sucks, right? Because everyone has a smartphone in their pocket. Why would they just use a phone? What's your name? Alan. Okay, so I'm going to put Alan's name on here so you know this is not paperwork. And so the thing about the evangelism teams and this kind of experience is they don't want to run any servers. They're an evangelism team. They're not a product team. They're not tech guys, right? But they would totally use an app if it was there, right? So the great thing about Smeech is that this is an app that you only have to build the experience for, right? So I'm running it, and it just worked. So what this app does is it uploads a photo to Buddy. Buddy takes that photo, watermarks it. This should refresh in a second with a tweet. Takes the photo, watermarks it, creates a thumbnail of it, saves the photo, puts it on a CDN, returns the URL. This should refresh in a second. And then the app tweets it out. So that whole experience of taking a picture, and if you click on the link. So there's you guys, and it's sort of hard to see in the slide, but there's Alan. So what Buddy did is we applied a watermark to the photo, uploaded it, saved it, CDN'd it. It's replicating around the world right now. The app developer never touched a single line of server code. They don't know what database it is. They don't know what the web service technology is. They don't know what the cache is. They don't know what any of that stuff is, right? This is a very simple example of what Buddy can do, right? And so if you start to extrapolate this to all these different ideas you have and all these different things you want to prototype and you didn't because you don't want to set up all these servers, right? Use Buddy. It's ready to go today. And if they wanted to build the same app, they'd have to have a photo system and a watermark system and a user account system. All of that is ready to go today. Create user, add photo with watermark, tweet, etc. Okay. So, shameless plug, we are hiring. So right now, we're hiring for senior developers. So if there's senior developers who are looking to go to an awesome startup, come talk to us. We're a great place to work. So let's talk about platform as a service.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So it was great to have the watermarking app. It almost implies that there's a huge library behind Buddy that has all these different apps that we use things. Add one?
Different.
So what I saw you do is, someone created an interface, I guess.
Yes, so you create the interface,
Yep.
and you call our
I
API.
take the picture, I send it up to the cloud, it does the watermarking.
You send it to Buddy. Yep.
Pretend I don't know how to do any of that stuff.
Yeah, so what you'll see at Buddy is an API that says add photo.
I see.
And it says, give me the photo. Do you want to comment on the photo? Do you want a location for the
So there's some
photo?
building blocks that I can use to sort of assemble
That's
whatever
right.
I want to have happen.
That's right. And then another important part about that actually, we don't do any UI. So we are 100% cloud. We are not client. Our mantra is you can either be really good at cloud or really good at client or suck at both of them. So we choose to be awesome at cloud. So we do SDKs and samples and things like that. We will never do a drag and drop and produce an app, or a drag and drop and here's a UI component. We'll never do that. We'll partner with companies that will offer that. We will never do that ourselves. Yeah.
I'm just having a hard time understanding what exactly you do. I'm not a developer. So,
Sure.
Is this sort of like a development platform?
It's a, there's a slide later that talks directly to our 3 products. Because we actually have 3 different products that we're sort of showing here.
So would I be creating my other type of app that
So the classic scenario.
takes panoramas or something?
Sure.
And then use your all the technologies you've got in the cloud to create my app,
Not to create the app, to power the app.
to power the app.
So let's take a different example. Let's say you're Coca-Cola, and you're going to build the Summer of Coke app. Okay? So you're Coca-Cola, you sell drinks. You don't want to run servers, right? So you go hire whoever you want to build your app. And they're going to build that app on 3, 4, 5 platforms. There's an iOS version, there's an Android version, Windows 8, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? At the end of that whole engagement, the developers that wrote all the code, you, Coca-Cola, and the agency that you hire, the only thing you care about is analytics. You don't care what database it's running on. You don't care where the servers are. What you really care about is how is my Summer of Coke campaign affected with a Twitter campaign or a Facebook campaign or that Super Bowl ad or whatever the case might be. So what Buddy does is we provide to your developer a ready-to-use platform so it's easier and cheaper for you to have the app built. But to Coke, we also give you the analytics. Those analytics today for you, Coca-Cola, are really hard to get.
But can I build it within your ecosystem, or am I building it out there?
You build it in whatever you want.
Okay.
So right now today, there are iOS apps, Android apps, Samsung TV apps, Windows Phone apps, Ford Sync apps, all running on top of Buddy. Any client platform using our cloud. Let me give you another example. It's not uncommon for a big brand app, not Instagram, those sorts of things, but like an app for a movie or something like that, to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars per month running the cloud. It's very common. Okay? Buddy makes that simpler and cheaper and easier. Right? And we specifically go after brands, agencies, and dev shops. So we'll get into this in more detail. I think we're going to answer a little bit more in a little bit. So platform as a service, the generic space. And this is called backend as a service. I gave a talk in Belgium a month ago, and guy had this giant semantic debate about whether we're software as a service. It doesn't matter. It's just star AAS, right? So, why are people doing this, right? You see StackMob and Heroku and Parse and all these sorts of different things. So number one, gone are the days where you can build a client-only app. Every successful app has some kind of cloud in it, whether it's sharing or pictures or tweeting or whatever, right? You can no longer build an app that's successful that's only on the client. A few years ago you could, no longer do it. It's very common if you go talk to professional dev shops. These are companies that build 20, 30, 50 apps a month for all sorts of different clients. That client might spend up to 75% of that cost on the cloud for the app, let alone the app. And remember, the cloud for the app, the consumer, never sees, right? Like if I'm running an app on my phone, I don't care what the cloud is. I just care, is that app awesome and do I run it every day? And third, every minute that's spent, every hour that you spend in a spec review, every hour that you spend maintaining a service, et cetera, is an hour taken away from building an awesome UX, which is what gets you the users, right? This is the core reason PaaS is happening, right? It's too expensive, it takes too much time, and you have to focus on getting users, which is why you're building those apps in the first place. This is a, there's a company called Kinvey.
You want to see that better? Is that important?
Pardon?
Is it important to get the better view of that?
Uh,
Like in the lights.
oh.
The details, yeah. The details important.
Sure, just for a minute, maybe. Actually,
Yeah.
I'll
It
just,
goes all dark, but I can run it for you.
Oh, okay, cool. So there's a company called Kinvey, which is also in the BaaS space. They say PaaS, we say PaaS. So here's the key takeaway from this. This is a very young industry. If you go back 16 months, okay, most of these dots in here go away, right? This is a very young industry, a very young economic model, right? Now this is Kinvey, it's map, so Kinvey's at the middle, right? And Buddy's just above them. But this is really trying to show the interchange between big companies, hosting, services, etc. And you'll hear BaaS and PaaS and all these sorts of different things. It doesn't really matter. It's really making the dev's life easier, making it faster to build those apps, and providing some level of stats or analytics back to the brand, or back to the publisher. Okay? Thank you very much. So, why is all this happening? Pure economics. Okay? This is from Engine Yard, from Forbes. 512 million in 2010, 1.7 billion in 2015. I'll tell you that the investors that we work with think 1.7 billion is low. Really low. Right?
What's the number about?
So this is, the traditional model is not PaaS. The traditional model is go to AWS, go to Azure, go to Rackspace, or Colo, and build your own cloud, your own server system. Okay? PaaS simplifies all that. Right? So traditionally, 3 years ago, actually Dig is a really good example, so dig.com. They were built 7 years ago. They had 500 servers. When they were relaunched, so they got sold, they got rebought, they relaunched, rebuilt the site from scratch. And they had something like 15 servers running on Amazon. So, you know, several years ago, you as a company were investing in 500 servers to run Dig. Now you just go to Amazon and spin up some systems. PaaS is a further abstraction from that. It's even easier than that, right? So in 2010, what it's saying is 500 million was spent making it easier, right? In 2015, what the estimate from Forbes is, they're going to spend 1.7 billion. And the way they look at it is, you know, I can go get my groceries at QFC, or I can have Amazon Fresh delivered. Amazon Fresh is the PaaS. Amazon Fresh is making it easier for me to get my groceries, faster to get my groceries, cheaper to get my groceries. Or on the old manual way, I can go down to my grocery store. Does that make a little sense? So the core message.
You're mixing acronyms though, so I can see why you have some geeks that think you semantic debate.
Yeah, so
Because Azure and AWS call what they do PaaS.
that's right.
And they
That's right.
call their VM offerings IaaS.
Everyone has,
So
yeah.
They're
just
really evolving to a third.
pick whatever term you
Yeah.
want, I'll just accept it. So if you think about PaaS, there's 3 core segments that we look at. Okay? The first one is really CPU and storage. Okay? Azure, rack space, something. What you're really renting here, whether it's a database or a file system or whatever, is CPU and storage. You're right above colo. You're right above racking servers and replacing hard drives when they die. Okay? To operate here, you have to have huge scale, right? Hundreds of thousands of systems and all these VMs and all these like crazy things. The billing for this is always utilization based. Hours of this, gigabytes of that, etc. Right? So if you're looking for a PaaS solution for your cloud, this is great because you can build anything that you want to. You can have any.
To operate here, you have to have huge scale. You mean as a provider?
As a provider.
Amazon has to have huge scale.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So what's great for the developer is this bucket is you can do whatever you want, you have any stack you want, but you also have to build everything, maintain everything, at some level scale everything. So there's sort of this myth that you just go create AWS and just auto magically scales. That doesn't work. So the second bucket that we look at, the second option.
So that happens in Windows Azure though, automatically.
So it actually doesn't, right? Because if you hit the 150 gig SQL limit, you're stuck.
Yeah, based
Right?
on
It doesn't magically say, oh, I have 10 terabytes of data, I'll create 10 terabytes of database. Right? So that's right. You have to do the federation, you have to shard it out, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't magically scale. Now, there are things like elastic load balancers and things like that. There's all sorts of abstraction here. Fundamentally, you're still spending time on the servers. It may be a VM versus a piece of hardware, but you're still spending time on the servers, not on the app. Okay? So the second bucket is tooling. What these guys do is they provide really cool tooling experiences around building your cloud. So it may be they'll run unit tests for you when you upload your code. It might be that you can shove arbitrary data at it for parse. And maybe they have a really cool regular expression system. But really, it's a tooling experience. Because fundamentally, you're still designing the database, you're still designing the web service model, et cetera, et cetera. You may not write all the code, but it's really a tooling experience. Really, what these guys do is they do a very good job at abstracting away from this. Right? So if you go read how Kinvey and Parse and those guys scale, they'll talk very openly about they use Azure, they use AWS, et cetera. It's just a tooling layer on top of those services. And they do a really great job. They're very good. So if you want more control, but you don't want to play with VMs, Parse and those guys are great choices. But they also tend to be a little bit siloed for technologies. So there's .NET companies, there's iOS and Android companies, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things about here is you can build a 100% cross-platform solution, but you have to build a 100% cross-platform solution. Here, it's sort of hard to pick one company and have it 100% cross-platform. So for example, push notifications, engaging your customer. You might go with Urban Airship, which is clearly the leader in that industry. But they don't do Windows 8, not yet at least. Right? They don't do Windows Phone. Right? So if you want to do push notifications for Urban, which is an awesome company, you have to do iOS and Android with them, but then you have to go stand up your own Windows Phone and Windows 8 solutions. Right? And if you want to do push for Samsung TVs, you have to do another solution. Right? Bunny is at the opposite end of the spectrum, on the whole other end. We're scenarios. So we don't care about the platform, don't care about the VMs, don't care about any of that stuff. In fact, we're not going to tell you how that stuff works. Just start calling the API. So Sneech, that little demo that I showed you, that was built last night by a company on Elance. I went to Elance, I hired a company, I said I want to build this little app, here's an API to add a photo, here's an API to create a user, go. When I walked in this morning, the app was in my inbox. That's how Sneech was created. And now we will finish Sneech and make a better version of it for later demos. But that thing I just ran on my phone, that's how it was built. It's just from an Emacs plugin. If we didn't have Buddy, they would still be trying to figure out where to build this plugin. They'd be still trying to figure out what database to use, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? The other thing with Buddy is we're API based, we're not utilization based. Right? So you don't know what percentage of VMs or gigabytes of this or that or whatever. It's just API, 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 API. Right? So it's just a counter, essentially.
You're skipping over some really important issues of scale and cost. Are you going to get there later? Or?
In terms of how we scale?
Right, because as a user, you're right, I take for granted that when I push the button,
Yeah,
half a second later it's
it
coming
works,
back.
right, yeah,
And that happens whether I'm in Paris or
That's
in
right.
Seattle
That's
or
right.
wherever.
yeah.
And so
So-
that's hard.
It's very, so scale is, designing the system is easy, scaling it is hard, right? Like as a startup, having an idea, that's simple. Executing the idea is really hard. That's where the magic sauce is, right? And so every company in the world that has a cloud system has a scaling issue. Every single company. Some companies do more, some do better or worse, or some people automatically scale, some people, sort of pre-scale and all these different things. Every company has a scaling issue, right? At some level. And the idea is just to buffer that from the user. The end user shouldn't see that. It should be a great experience every time. That's part of what our SLA is. It's part of what our commitment to our developers is we will auto-scale that system for you.
Are you going to talk more about how you do that?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Because I don't believe you until you.
Okay. There'd be 10,000 developers who disagree with you, but that's great. But yeah, I'll go through how we scale. Yeah, we'll go through it a little bit. So one of the other things about Buddy is we're worldwide. So like one of our top developers is in South Africa, right? We have apps running all over the system. Another thing about the scenario-focused engineering that we talked about a little bit that we'll get into in a few minutes is we think end-to-end. And so this is a little game called Skirmish. It's like a 4 square for teams. So you check in as team pink, team red, team orange, not as me or you, right? And your team takes over a place. Well, in order for this to work, in order for a developer to be able to build this, you have to have a database of locations. You have to have the Starbucks, and you have to have Microsoft Campus, and all those different things, right? Because we focus end-to-end, we have that database of locations already. Now, you could use Foursquare, for example, but now in your app, you have to have locations powered by Foursquare. So you've instantly given away brand equity. You cannot, and then you can't have deals because you have to use Foursquare deals, etc. Right? This is all about white label, big brands, end-to-end. So you could be right now in France and do a search and get listings back in French, right? And you can be here and get them in English, etc., etc. And so what's great for the developer is you know from day one that your app, whatever country you choose to ship it in, will work with the cloud. And that's not 100% true for the other services. Products. This is sort of back to your question a little bit. So Buddy has 3 core products. So the first product, the usage, is the core API. That's the thing that the developers use, the dev shop uses, right? That's what Smeech, that's what the Emacs project was all about. Call this API, call this API, call this API, okay? The second product is analytics. So one of the things that we do, which is also very unique, is we generate analytics automatically. Normally, if you wanted to do this, you would do Cogent or Flurry or one of those other systems. And those systems are great, but you have to instrument the app. So when you're shipping the app, you're going to say, I care about this pivot, and this pivot, and this pivot, and this pivot, and I'm going to put that code in the app to record that analytic data, and then you ship the app. Some of the problems with that are, number one, if you decide later you want to care about a different pivot that you didn't originally think about, you need to update the app and reship it, and then get everyone to upgrade. And then you start collecting the data. One of the things about Buddy that's unique is whether you're using our analytics system or not, we are constantly, with every API, recording analytics. And if you think about a scenario API, every call is a narrative. I'm adding a friend in Chicago who has 20 photos, etc., etc., etc. It's not set object, etc., etc. So if you look at our dashboard versus our competitor's dashboard, ours is very cluttered, it's very busy, tons of data. Theirs is not. One of the reasons is we know a ton about the app, the others don't. Scenario versus feature, right?
So you only collect the analytics when the user does an action which
When an
results in a
API
call
is
to the
called.
server.
When an API is called.
Your Buddy.com API is called.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, which is not always per user. It's not always I click the button,
correct.
right? So there's lots of times where the app is searching in the background or sending a notification to a friend or things like that.
Correct. But the thing is, like, sometimes the app providers might be interested in knowing how the users are interacting with the app.
Yeah,
And those actions might not translate to their
that's
call
right. So we
server.
actually get this request a lot is, I love Buddy, it's great, but I want to know what buttons they're clicking on and what they're not, and if they went 3 steps into purchasing something and stopped, those sorts of like app experience usage steps. That's something that's on our roadmap to add. We don't have it today. It's actually a very common request that we get. So today it's really about that graph of data that's automatically generated by the API.
You can't really do that anyway, since you don't have the knowledge of what's going on in their app. Right?
So how those systems work is it's a manual, this happened, this happened, this happened from the app. Right? So, yeah.
Or whatever events got sent back.
That's right.
To the extent the data is there, you can mine it.
That's right, yeah. And so that's how those systems normally work, right? And so if you think about it, most of the systems, most of the services are generic. They're not tied to an experience. It's just the experience happens to be telling them what's going on, sort of a data-driven kind of model. That's just like us.
So isn't it cost prohibitive for you to capture all this data, even for people who are not interested in analytics? Like, one app, millions of customers for that app,
Sure.
and now you're storing the data with the hope that someday this guy wanna pay for analytics and we have the data for them. How would you scale that kind of system?
So costs are tied to monetization. So it's only too expensive if you don't make enough money on it, right? So if I spend $20 to acquire a user, but I make 500 on them, is 20 bucks too expensive? Right? So when you get into costs and thinking about it's going to be too expensive, it's really about the economic model, the business model of the company. And our business model allows us to do all of this on the backside. Yeah.
I'm starting to get this now.
Okay. It's complicated.
Yeah, so
It's hard to tell my mom, by the way, what I did. She has no clue what
you need
this
to
is.
boil this down so your mom can understand it. So I have a wine e-commerce website,
Yeah,
and I also have a sort of the back end of that. I've got another website that uses Google Maps and geolocates wineries.
yeah,
And so I see that I'm reading your website right now, and so I see you've got sort of a geolocation database.
yes.
Can I migrate then my SQL database with all that content
Over to our system?
over to your system?
Yes.
And then when I'm visiting the wineries, take photos on my phone,
And tag into that location?
Tag
and
into
search
that
on the back
application,
and-
and
Absolutely.
then put a cool filter on it too.
That's right, because we have 300 plus filters from API.
And the way I would do that would be to work with my user interface guy,
Yeah, to migrate the app. Yeah.
and then I hire one of your developers in your system.
No. Well, so anyone can program against our API. We have a set of partners that we work with that we'd be certainly happy to recommend. But you
Okay.
can literally hire,
Or could I do it?
let's say, any good developer, and they can use the system.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you're using things that a lot of different developers already.
Yeah, so with every platform, it's a little bit of a different paradigm. So if you're calling the Twitter API versus the Facebook API, you have to learn how that system works.
Okay.
Slightly different.
But for your geolocation, instead of me doing the Google API, I can do your
That's right.
geolocation.
That's right. And now let me blow your mind. Now you can run an automated system that says, when anyone gets to this winery, send them a push notification for a deal on a bottle of wine.
That's what I want to do.
There you go. Right? Or you can then run analytics for, I want to know of all these notifications I send out to all these different wineries, how wineries in Washington versus California behave from a purchase perspective. Is there a different kind of demographic that the ads or the push notifications appeal to, right? And are they taking 5 photos or taking 10 photos? And are Android users more involved than Windows Phone users?
Do you want a side project and work for us?
So all of those things I just told you about are things our customers do every day.
Okay,
Right?
got it.
So, go ahead, please.
You say it's completely hit-based,
Yeah,
so there's no, whether I'm sending a 5 bytes or 5 terabytes for a picture
Oh, yeah.
is the same?
Yes, so there is, if you go look at our pricing model, there is an upper limit for the storage, but it's, I can't remember exactly what it is right now. But a normal app with normal photos, let's say from any phone, won't hit the limit. If you actually try and upload a 5 terabyte image, you'd have to have an enterprise agreement for that. And your phone would never fit. They should be posted with timeout, right? So, yeah.
Well, but a bunch of 10 gigabyte images turn into a terabyte pretty quickly.
Yeah, so that would be on the website, so I think enterprise pricing or something like that.
No one's hit the cap yet.
No one's hit the cap. 10,000 apps, no one's been posted.
You don't remember the number on the cap? Is it
Uh,
a
Well,
gigabyte,
we actually-
terabyte, a petabyte?
No, it's you. We don't actually list it because it's large enough that we said, let's wait till someone even approaches it, and then we'll start to have that conversation.
Storage is so ridiculously cheap. The thing that's expensive is the service around the storage. Like how do you expose it? How do you maintain it? Things like that. Storage itself is very commoditized. It's very cheap. Whether it's on Azure or S3 or whatever.
Are you using a cloud-based storage backend? Or do you
We are.
have your own?
So, and we have different systems. So let me get to the
All right.
the number 3.
All right.
So one of the other unique things about Buddy that nobody else can do is custom deployments. So there's lots of customers, because remember we go after brands and agencies and those kinds of guys, that for a legal reason or a policy reason want to own the data. They don't want the data to leave their data center, right? Lots of different reasons. So for example, if you're a government agency, you need to own the data, right? All regulations. If you're in Europe, there's all sorts of European laws. The Patriot Act prevents a lot of US hosting from European countries. If you want to go to China, you have to be in country, right? Guess what's not in country? AWS, Azure, something. So Buddy is the only one in this space that can come put the Buddy system into your data center. So if you're a big brand, let's say you're Starbucks, and you want to have your Starbucks app built on Buddy, okay? But you want to control that data for whatever reason you decide. We'll say, no problem, we'll come put it in your data center or a data center of your choice. We're the only ones that can do that. And one of the reasons is, of course, is if you go back to that tooling experience, most of those guys wrap public cloud, right? So it's hard for those types of companies to go to a private cloud system. We're set up from day one to do private cloud. That's one of our sort of engineering rules.
Anything private cloud, would you mean the storage or
The whole thing, right? So, for example, our normal endpoint is webservice.buddyplatform.com. That's a normal API endpoint. If you're Starbucks, maybe it's api.starbucks.com. It's running in your data center.
It's like Buddy in a box.
Buddy in a box. That's right. That's a good one. I'm gonna use that. It's like Buddy in a box. And that's obviously an enterprise agreement. You don't do that for a brand new, that's a tiny small app, right? But if you think about major brands, you think about major agencies, etc., this is a key feature. So go back to monetization, etc., it's a key feature.
You're gonna have a different pricing model for that.
Very different pricing model. Yes.
Have
Yeah.
customers with custom.
We actually give quotes on it on almost a daily basis.
How many you have deployed though?
We don't talk about that, unfortunately. Yeah. So one of the things is, I'll give you an example. There was a tourism board for a government. They were building new tourism apps for, I don't know what they did. And of course, it's government, it's tourism, so there's a couple things. Number one, it has to be in a government data center. Number two, the tourism board definitely does not want to run servers, right? Because you think if they go hire a dev shop to build an AWS or Azure, if their guinea pig of engagement is a login to manage databases. If you're a tourism board guy, you're probably not a technical guy, right? You're there about promoting tourism. And so they love the idea of Buddy because they can drop it in their data center, we're compliant with all that stuff, and then we can give all these awesome reports. Because when they report back to the city council or whatever, those guys just want to see analytics. Whatever they look like, they just want to see analytics. They don't care about terabytes of this and gigabytes of that, etc.
So you maintain that data center?
Yeah, so we do servicing. So it's a enterprise agreement, just like an enterprise software sale. So it would be, if a hard drive dies, whose fault? Who's going to fix it? Things like that. Absolutely.
Do you have a hosting facility in mainland China?
We have several partners. Yes.
Yes.
Some of it's white label, right? So some of it's a little, what's deployed is a little bit private to our customers. How we build it and stuff, we certainly talk about, but what's deployed, where it's deployed, etc. is because it's white label, we protect the privacy of the customer. It's part of the privacy agreement. It's another reason why we emphasize you don't own the data, you own the data. It's not my analytics, it's your analytics.
It's
Yeah.
getting complicated again.
Okay. This is the universe of Buddy as it existed, actually, pretty much up to today, I guess. So, when we think about scenario engineering, right? The planets are the scenarios, and the moons, or little satellites, whatever you want to call them, are the things you can do with the planets. So if you think of messaging, right? You can send and receive and search and add custom data and all these different things. This is how we engineer at Buddy. This is how we think about it. We don't think about it this API and this API and this API. We think of it as, I want to do game support. What do I need? I need scores and players and high score tables, and I need to be able to search dynamically, and it needs to be location aware. That's how we approach it. If you come from a Microsoft perspective, you've been through SFE training. Think of SFE training applied to the cloud, right? That's sort of what this is.
Is this graphic on your website?
Yes, yeah, this is an infographic that we made for our V1 launch in May. This graphic and the earlier graphic, the guy riding the cupcake, these were done by a company in Ballard called
Killer
Kill
infographics.
Infographics. Awesome team, awesome team. So if you need infographics, I'd highly suggest going to them. And this is on the website. Okay.
Can I upload videos to Buddy?
Not yet. So things on our roadmap would include storage, videos. I'm actually going to talk about a roadmap thing next. There's about 6 months of engineering work that we have whiteboarded out of roadmap work. But because we're a startup and we're nimble, I guarantee you in 6 months we won't do that. We'll do that different, right? So here's an example. This is something that was not on our list a week ago, but we will ship this in 2 weeks. We get a feature request all the time about receipt verification for in-app purchases. So if you have an app and you're monetizing it with in-app purchases, you say, hey, charge $5, and you get a receipt back from the system, and then you unlock the comic book or the sword or whatever they want, right? If that's how you monetize, you have to be really, really careful that every receipt is valid. Because if you get a bad receipt, if you get a fake receipt or a hacked receipt, they're basically stealing money, right? And then you don't monetize and you have to go back to your data. So we get this request all the time. This is a classic feature request, right? The problem is if we were to answer this request by setting up an API, instead of planets and moons, there'd be all these crazy APIs running all over the place and we couldn't consume it. It'd be really hard for the developer to understand what we do. So we look at that and say, okay, the core thing here is they want to do in-app purchases. That's the core thing they're really asking for. Help me with in-app purchases. So what does a developer need or an app need outside of the payment for in-app purchases? And so that one feature will turn into 30 to 40 APIs covering, I want to have a store that I can search and maintain. So a wine store, for example, I want to list wines from the cloud. I don't want to have to update the app. I want to have a receipt system. So I want to be able to save receipts, location tag receipts, tag them to a user, tag them to a custom block of data that I can later search on. And then of course I want a history, history. I also want to verify with the server that that receipt is valid. So if they actually bought the wine, they used the little QR code to get it, all those things. And so what we'll do is we'll look at this feature request, whiteboard it out from a 10,000 foot view with the core concepts this developer needs, or the app needs, and then we'll build it and ship it. And that whole process for this commerce API, which I'm trying to find a better name for because I hate that name, will happen in about 3 weeks. Right? That's scenario engineering. And that's what we can do at a startup. We can be very quick, very nimble. But it's also, there's a lot of discipline behind this because you have to, it makes a lot of sense just to go stand up a verification API. It would take a few hours. But you can't do that. You can't react to it. Or you have this giant mishmash of APIs running all over the place, and then we don't have an API that we can dock and maintain, et cetera, et cetera. Just make a little of this things hopefully. So, scaling. So let's talk about how we scale. So this is what we call a buddy cluster. It's not a, and we call it a cluster only because we can't think of a better term. It's not a database cluster, okay? So this is a set of roles, okay? The smallest number of physical machines here is about 100, by the way, okay? Just push services and email services and databases and web services and load balancers and firewalls and all this kind of different stuff. So what we do is when that dev signs up, we assign the dev to a cluster. You may have one cluster running or 1,000 clusters running. Okay? That dev creates one or more apps. But for us, we silo on the dev, not the app. Because there are some things in our roadmap that allow the developer to go from app to app for searching and data. Because today everything is siloed per app. So app 1 cannot see app 2's data. But in the future, we will allow that within a dev. So this is sort of how we scale, is we create lots of clusters, and clusters are big and small. So Buddy in a box is a cluster, is this. There's lots of roles in here, there's diagnostic stuff, and all sorts of crazy things. Services running all over the place. This is the Buddy system, and from a role perspective. Right? So like if we think about push, we support iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and Windows 8 today. So there are a set of servers running services that do push for all 4 platforms. Right? Does that make a little bit of sense?
So you have a dedicated cluster per app?
We have a cluster with many devs on it, which have been mapped to many apps. So let's say this is...
So you, the clusters are multi-tenant per dev.
Yeah.
Many devs can go to
Yeah, so one cluster may have 100 devs, and then one dev who's super big may have his own cluster, and then another cluster might have 500 devs because they're small.
And if I'm a dev, I'll get 5 apps, they all get served by that cluster.
That one cluster. And you never know if you move clusters, which cluster you're on, you never know any of that, right? If we switch out our database system in the back, you never know that we did that. So for example, we originally launched with App Fabric as our caching system. We switched to Memcache. Devs never knew that happened. Right?
You're not using any cloud provider in the backend at all? Like you're
We
not
use
using
cloud
Amazon or
provi- we use
something?
public cloud for backups and for some of the file storage.
What about data?
All the other data that we store ourselves.
Okay. And you dynamically scale?
Yep.
So you build a public cloud of your own
Yes.
using your own technology and not like a third-party public cloud.
No,
company.
it's all built from the ground up. Sorry, we didn't build a database, right? That's
Right.
SQL.
Yes,
Yeah, we didn't build
but,
WCF.
So the question is like you are going to the developers and saying, hey, why build your own service
Yes.
if we have built it for you? Now the question applies to you, why build this public cloud infrastructure yourself
Private cloud.
or private cloud?
No,
if
that's
it-
why, private cloud.
And it will
So go back to the products. Number 3, that's why. So if we built it on a public cloud, right? At a minimum, to support that, I'd have 2 code bases. So let's say I was built on Azure, but also wanted to support private cloud. Well, I can't use Federation in Azure now. That's an Azure-only feature. Azure goes up to 150 gigs today, but we'll get bigger for databases in the future, right? But I can easily buy a terabyte database server, right? The reason why we have our own system is to be able to have that with one code base. Because as a startup, I can't have these 10 engineers on public cloud stuff and these 5 engineers on private cloud stuff. No matter where that cluster is, whether it's our data center or a customer's data center, it's all the same software. So this is really about efficiency and those are things.
Yeah, I mean, I get your point, but on the other hand, what I'm thinking is that it's, as a startup, you have very few resources.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think the way you explained it, the answer was, I think, towards a few resources, but what I'm saying is, again, this is like in hindsight, shouldn't you be targeting only public cloud? Because if few resources,
The
build the
business
model,
model
and then go
is
to private
betting
cloud.
on this.
So your business model's core component is this private
All
cloud
three.
deployments.
All three, yeah. Right, private cloud in the business model is a very significant part of the business. Right, if we only did public cloud, we couldn't do number three. And in fact, we actually went through that exercise of, well, maybe we should launch public cloud,
Yeah.
like for the first year or two or something, and then do private cloud. We sort of started thinking about what would the engineering cost be? Because the problem with the public cloud, because they're awesome, you start to use public cloud only features. Elastic load balancers, you start writing tools around EBS volumes, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get to a year later and you want to do private cloud. Dave, our CEO, sells a private cloud. And I say, whoa, it's going to take me 6 months to actually build that system. Because I have all this public cloud stuff built, baked into the code. Okay?
Makes sense.
How many servers, do you have more than 1,000 servers?
We don't disclose how many servers. It's part of the
It's
system.
about the number of transactions you process,
Millions. Millions
millions.
of API hits per day. Transactions, if it's from a database perspective, would be hundreds of millions. Right? Because like one of the things, for example, you make an API call, it's a bunch of security stuff that happens. Is this dev allowed to call this API? Is this app allowed to call this API? Did you pay your bill? All these different things. And then we actually get to what the API hits. Right? So if you think about transactions, hundreds of millions, you think about API hits, millions per day.
So to your point here, each API hit is built at a fraction of a penny.
Yeah, it's like 10 cents per thousand.
Yes, sure. So people on the web are used to free stuff. They're used to have a page load happening free, clicking on a button free. So the thing is, if you have this business model that each API hit is built, then an app developer, if he pushes his app out and he doesn't have great monetization story,
Yeah.
and he's getting billed a lot because the app is
So think about that scenario. So first off, we have 500,000 APIs for free per month. Okay? Up to 500,000 free per month. But think about that scenario. I have an app as a developer that I've shipped that's running on a free system. It doesn't really exist. It doesn't really exist. There's micro VMs and all these sorts of things. But if I have an app that has any kind of traction, I'm paying a bill, whether it's to Amazon or Microsoft or Rackspace or what.
When you're paying the bill, but my question was around monetizing the each API hit versus compute, storage, or what some other mechanism. I was wondering, how did you decide this is the best way to monetize versus anything else?
Oh, so sort of two things. One, the scale that we can operate, we can give an API call cheaper than if you map those API calls to services and storage and stuff. The other thing is if you do utilization based, you have to telegraph to the developer what they're running on. So the reason why Heroku is utilization based is because you know how many dynos you spun up. But with Buddy, that's all abstracted. It's behind the magic curtain. You don't know any of that.
Well,
I'm sorry?
It's just that you don't need to know.
You don't need to know.
No,
Yeah, don't worry about it.
That's the whole model.
That's right, yeah.
But the same thing with Windows Azure, right? You don't know how many VMs your app
You
is running on.
absolutely know.
Well, you have a map.
Absolutely
get
know.
dozens of every month.
No, I think you
Absolutely
but I
know.
thought you get billed for the bytes transferred and the storage.
And in that
system.
bill, we'll say how many VMs you have, and by the way, you've gone and told it how many VMs to do.
Explicitly, yeah.
Yeah.
And with storage. And storage.
Storage is a tiny percentage of what an app does. Storage is really, I don't want to say it's negligible, but it's very small for what the app does in the app, right? Instagram, storage is not the problem. It's the filters and the performance of it, how they upload in the background and all that stuff, right? It's not the storage, right? So the storage is actually it's important, but it's not like the thing that's going to sink it. Cluster. Okay, so just two more slides, or one more slide. So this is, we get asked a lot, like, what do you run on and all that kind of stuff. So this is the kind of tools as a startup that we use right now. This changes a lot. If I drew this list 6 months ago, it wouldn't be the same.
Well, it wouldn't be SQL 2012 6 months
It wouldn't be
ago.
SQL 2012 6 months ago. It wouldn't have been Memcache 6 months ago. It was Office 365. It wouldn't have been Dropbox 6 months ago. We were still sort of manually doing it. Now we're totally addicted to Dropbox for Teams. Awesome service. Yeah. Wouldn't have been Recurly 6 months ago. So we didn't have payments. Yeah, please.
Did you this part?
Yes, we're very proud of this partner. Absolutely.
You probably escaped from
No, it's still,
Yeah, so
it's not plus actually.
there's various levels of this part. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're very proud of being one company, proud of this part company. It's a great service.
You used NBC one time?
The developer portal, so we have, so the developer portal that you log into, where you see your stats and all that kind of stuff, that's a whole NBC site. It's kind of a, yeah, NBC is a great technology. It's sort of one of those things that kind of comes down to what you love and what you want to do, and you believe in the model. And there's lots of sort of religious arguments about this, right? And like, you know, you can go on Hacker News every day and read why Mongo sucks or why Mongo is awesome and all these different things. It's sort of, it's a lot of so we like NBC for what we use it for. It's great. The other thing, one of the other principles that we've been talking about with customers a lot, actually, is go where you generate IP. So if you're not generating IP by running your server, don't do it. Right? So for example, I don't generate IP by writing a system which checks if my systems are up, so we use Bingham. I don't generate IP by writing our own file sharing system, so we use Dropbox. Go where your IP is. If you generate IP by doing wine sales and having an amazing wine service, don't write the software yourself on the weekend. Focus on what you do great, right? So that's one of the things we talk to customers a lot about, is go where your IP is. If you're going to generate IP by storing the photo yourself on a server, don't use Buddy. Use Azure, AWS.
Shouldn't that be SOAP and REST and not SOAP and HTTP?
No, because we don't have a REST interface, we have an HTTP interface. So REST is a very specific protocol with verbs and stuff. We actually have a SOAP and a custom HTTP RPC style interface.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So one of the things on our roadmap is actually just to add a proper REST interface.
Have trouble with proxies that way?
Nope.
It's just HTTP.
Yeah, it's just the format, right? So, you know, the real difference between what our HTTP endpoint is and a REST endpoint is just the verb system.
Why'd you do SOAP at all?
For Windows.
And did you use WCF?
Yep. So it's all WCF. So the core reason to do SOAP beyond the SDKs, because we have SDKs that are built on the HTTP interface, the core reason to do SOAP is a dev experience. I can go into Visual Studio, add a service reference, and it looks like a built-in class. Right? Buddy dot add picture. Buddy dot.
Pull the WSDL.
That's right. The web service goes out, grabs the WSDL, and generates all that metadata. That's why we have a SOAP interface, is to make that dev onboarding experience really good. Right. I want to show you one more like 2-minute thing really quick. So when we think about scenarios, our scenarios are about the API, but they're also about the dev experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an account here.
Like the lights.
Sure. So I'm going to sign up just for an account. Let's see if I can do this in the dark. Okay, so this is the dev portal. And what you'll see in a second here is we generate an app. There's your app. So what we've done is we've gone and said, let's create a little sample app for Alan. This is an app from our perspective, not on the client. So this is, if you created an iPhone app and you're calling the API like crazy, this is what you're going to see. Our scenario focus goes all the way from the API to the building system to the dev portal. One of the things that really sucks is you go sign up for a system and it's all blank. You sign up for this awesome new service and everything's blank. It's kind of a bad onboarding experience. So what we do is say, no problem, we're going to go create a fake app in the Buddy system. We're going to assign you to a cluster, and we're going to start calling our public API as if you had wrote a Ruby app or a Samsung app or whatever app. And this is that dev experience. And so if you think about from a dev perspective, you're going to build the wine app, for example, all of this stuff you get for free. It's there today.
Populate with basically test data and.
That's right. So there's a service running in the cluster that just starts that listens for a new developer, and then starts calling the regular public API. And so it's generating the analytics just like if you had deployed an app to 1,000 folks. Right? This is part of that scenario focus, part of thinking end to end, trying to make the developer or the publisher or the brand experience awesome. That's what we try to do about it. So, thank you. But yeah.
I've got a question.
The numbers keep changing because the APIs are getting called. So you see here, the API calls, right? So the API is being called, and I think it'll top out, I think it's probably done now. But if you were to go look at pictures or devices or whatever, right? So look at pictures, there's the pictures I've uploaded, and locations for the pictures, and I can click on the thumbnails, I can go to the user and see what phone they're running. All of those things, automatic. Hard to do yourself, time consuming. We have it for free. This is part of that stats analytics system that I was telling you about.
I'm kind of stuck on the billing aspect.
So you're really asking how we make money.
No, I have a follow-up question. So basically, what I'm thinking is that you need to have a subscription-based app to be as a developer. No, but think of it like, let's say like you sold your app for $1 a piece.
Remember, we don't build the app.
No, I get that, but as an app developer, you sold the app for $1 a piece, right? And now that app is with millions of customers.
Yep.
So they got $1 from each person.
And yet every month they cost them more money.
Exactly.
Yep.
So the question is like, how would they make money? Like, you know, if they are
Yep.
not a subscription-based app.
Yep. That's why in-app purchasing is where all the apps are going. That's exactly why. And remember, a lot of apps that you buy are marketing apps. So like the Harry Potter, the Hobbit's coming out. It's got an awesome app. That's a marketing app. Even though it's a cool experience and I can go look at all this stuff, it's a marketing app. Right? A lot of apps that we use are marketing expenses. They're not a game or Instagram. A lot of those apps in app stores are marketing apps. And so they're really, so for example, and this might be easier. When we go into a brand, we go to the CMO, not the CTO. That might help a little bit.
Sure.
Because what we're really selling them is the analytics system. The API is just a detail.
So are the apps that are built on your platform just going to use your platform? Like, do you provide all the services that they need?
So that's the vision. So we want to do 80% of the market, 100% of the scenarios.
Yeah.
We're not there today. So we have a lot of apps that use Buddy and something else.
Okay.
So it's very common to see Buddy and Flurry because they're used to using Flurry, or Buddy and, or even Urban Airship, or whatever, right? Because devs have services that you fall in love with and you learn and all these other things. What we hear from those dev shops is the apps they're building have gone from shipping with 4, 5, 6 services to maybe 1 or 2, Buddy and something else. If you think of it from a practical perspective, when your credit card expires, you have to go update 6 services or your app turns off. With Buddy, you update 1. Right? There's all these sorts of very tactical things that happen when you have all these services. 6 SDKs, right? 6 APIs to maintain. But like you could, like for example, you would do Buddy and Twilio, because we don't have Twilio services. You do Buddy, certainly we have tons of apps that are Buddy in Facebook, Buddy in Twitter, things like that. Absolutely.
I have a question. So when you provision a dev for a cluster, would that have a scaling issue if the app is super popular? Why don't you provision apps per cluster?
So every second, why don't we do the app per cluster?
Yeah.
So today, all the data is per app. So app 1 can never see app 2's data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
But they can only in one cluster.
Well, hold on. So that's how it is today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I can only run a search for places per app, not across the apps.
Mm-hmm.
If I had one developer, 2 apps on different clusters,
Mm-hmm.
I now have this cluster trying to query this cluster.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we do it per dev. Because in the future, we will allow the dev to run dev account level things, not just app account level things.
Mm-hmm.
So another way to think about it is, we store data at the user level, the end user level. We store data at the app level. Today, we don't store at the dev level, but in the future we will. And if we had them on different clusters, those queries would be crazy expensive. Because one cluster might be here, one cluster may be in New York. Right?
Well, the way you do it is you store your data in one place, and then you have multiple apps running, right?
Yeah, well, no,
You don't
remember,
store data into two clusters.
So remember that the cluster is a set of roles, right? So that cluster is 100 machines. So if those 100 machines are talking to a different set of 100 machines, that query is really expensive, whether it's a web service or database or whatever, versus if it's all in the same cluster. If it's all in the same cluster, it's probably in the same building. And more than likely on the same floor in the same room. Right? The second I have to go from the Westin to Tukwila, that's an expensive query. Or if I have to go to Tukwila to Chicago, that's even more expensive query. There's basic network latency issues, let alone machine performance issues.
But can I have an app running in Seattle and
You don't know where it's from.
You don't. But internally.
Internally, you would have all of your apps in one data center.
In one data center.
Yeah.
Okay.
Today, we could put them in different data centers and it wouldn't really matter, but in the future, it will matter a lot.
How are you geolocated?
Yeah.
So I just want to be sensitive about the time, so there are lots of questions.
And I already asked one. So.
Sure, go ahead.
So you have a pass.
Yeah.
Good. How do you pronounce it? Pass? I've never figured that out.
Pass.
This is a semantic debate.
How do you pronounce IaaS? That's the better one.
Software as a service.
So, if you have something that maybe caters to a smaller niche, but
Yeah.
you could integrate, is there integration points for such
Yes.
into Buddy?
Yeah, so,
So I have a specific scenario that I already handled.
yes, so we do have what we refer to as a bridge solution. So we do have customers that come to us that I have this existing system, but I don't really like maintaining it. And I really want to use your system, but I can't just switch wholesale. Right? Maybe in the future I can or whatever. And so there's a bridge kind of technical implementation that we recommend. It's not the most elegant solution, but the customers that use it works very well. But it's not what we recommend either Buddy or not, right? But that's not
What if I
practical.
wanted a marketplace for my work? It works alongside us.
Well, I mean, you could resell Buddy if you wanted. You could resell things on top of it. So remember, like every app in the system today,
Yeah.
none of them say powered by Buddy.
Right. I could white label
Yeah.
Buddy.
Yeah. Now there'd be an agreement, of course, and all that.
Same question, how do you see your system?
For places or for
So,
data centers?
because you have one app in one data, say Seattle.
Yeah.
I have people, my app is selling to Europe, Africa.
Yeah,
When
absolutely.
they do that, all going to Seattle data center?
So, let's see how do we answer that. So let me answer it two ways. Number one, we have customers in South Africa right now today that will call the API in South Africa, in Europe, in Asia, in Australia, and in Seattle, and they're all within 10 milliseconds in terms of performance.
So, you see that in 10 minutes?
Yes. So that developer in South Africa right now who does an API call will have within a 10-second threshold, millisecond threshold of the speech app I just ran in. The other thing in terms of performance is we track performance of the request coming in to the request going out. So we can't really control from our data center to the client, whether it's local or like around the world. Our goal is to have that total request time, whether it's database, cache, or whatever, less than a second for every API. Okay?
That's not possible. I mean, what I worry about is that it's.
But
Yeah, so hold on. So today, the most expensive API is 150 milliseconds. But we also track the timestamps in between. So we know, to some degree, what the end consumer in South Africa, when it got there, because of the subsequent calls and some different things that we track. And we know that those queries are within 10 milliseconds if I'm just right here at the incubator. So we do geolocation. We do caching around the world and all those sorts of different things. But yes, absolutely. So those pictures that you saw is on a CDN right now. Absolutely. Yeah. But fundamentally, what we found, and this is one of the, so you guys don't know about the Westin. So you know the Westin Hotel, right? Right next to it's the Westin office building where the Seattle Internet Exchange is, right? So it wouldn't be too far out of realm to say that's where maybe one of our data centers is. And one of the reasons why you go to the exchange is because you have near instantaneous kind of transactions. But it's also very expensive. Yeah. You know, everything's like flying around at light speeds and but yeah. So today we see really no performance degradation around the world. But for example, if we had a massive European customer who was like really gung-ho about I need it in Europe for whatever reason, we would just go, no problem, put it on a cluster here. And the system supports that.
But if it has to be with NM,
There would be, so depending on the situation, there'd be one or two primary clusters. And there'd be, you know, the Africa guy might be a little bit faster and the Europe guy might be a little bit slower, or vice versa.
so one app can be on two,
One dev.
one that can be on,
Yeah.
or app, this app.
Yeah,
can be on
this is,
two.
one thing to say, sorry, is this is all a very simplistic version of what we do. Right, so that cluster diagram, that's for the slide, not for the engineering part of it. Right? So we don't talk about the Juniper hardware and all that other stuff that we have. So, so thank you guys a lot. Please grab a shirt before you leave. And remember that we're hiring for devs. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
My name is Vikas.
Alan?